Tonight, you will drift through the calm story of Game of Thrones, settling gently into an age when the great castles of Westeros stood bright and whole, when the realm was still new to itself, and the morning light fell on fresh stone and unworn banners before the story begins. Let yourself rest a moment. Feel the weight of your body, heavy and easy, sinking into the surface beneath you. Let your hands go soft where they lie. Now breathe in slowly, drawing the air as though it carries something clean. The cool breath of a stone corridor in a great keep, morning coming through a high window in long bars of early light. Fill yourself with it gently, and then let it go slowly, more slowly than it came, a long, quiet exhale that carries the last of the day out of you. Let your shoulders drop as the breath leaves. Let your jaw go loose. Breathe in again softly, as though you are drawing in the faint, sweet smell of new rushes on a flagstone floor, of beeswax candles and old timber, of a hall where nothing urgent is happening and nothing is asked of you. And breathe out slowly, your eyes growing heavy on the exhale, your body settling a little deeper into its rest. One more breath in, easy and unhurried, filling you with the stillness of these high, sunlit halls. And out, long and slow, your eyelids soft now, the world beyond them warm and golden and quiet. There is nothing to hold on to. The morning of the realm has you gently, and it is in no hurry at all. The realm was young once. You are standing in a courtyard of pale, freshly dressed stone, in a morning so still that the banners above you hang almost motionless. Their colors are bright and unwashed, their thread unfrayed, the dyes still vivid, red and gold and gray and green against the wide blue of the sky. The sun comes over the eastern rampart in a long, level wash of light, touching the tops of the walls first, and then spilling slowly down into the yard. The stones beneath your feet are warm already. The air carries the smell of grass and iron and fresh bread coming up from the kitchens somewhere below. And from somewhere farther off, the faint cold mineral scent of stone, freshly cut and set. This is Westeros before the long sorrow came. This is the age when the great houses sat in their seats, and the seats still held, when the mortar between the stones was new enough to catch the morning light and hold a little brightness in it, when the timber beams above the great halls still carried the faint, sweet resin of the forests they came from. You walk through a tall archway into a corridor, and the light follows you in long horizontal bars across the floor. The corridor is quiet. You hear the soft sound of your own footsteps, unhurried on the stone, and somewhere far ahead, the gentle sound of a chain, some meister making his rounds with no particular haste. The walls are hung with tapestries still vivid in their color, deep crimsons and warm golds. A pale silver direwolf stitched into dark thread, looking almost peaceful there against its field of gray. A long window at the corridor's end lets in the morning, and the dust in the air drifts through the light slowly, slowly turning. You pass through a hall where the long trestle table is already dressed for the midday meal, set with linen and small clay bowls of dried lavender and herbs. The chairs stand empty and patient. The fire at the far end is low, only coals now, breathing a faint red warmth into the cool air. Someone has left a goblet on the table, half filled with pale wine, and the surface of it lies perfectly still. Far to the north, Winterfell rises in the pale early light, its gray towers broad and solid against a sky that is still more white than blue. The great hall there is already lit. Tallow candles run down the length of both long tables, and the fires along the sides burn high, because even in summer the thick stone holds its northern cold, and the people inside have learned to be grateful for the warmth. The youngest of the household are still asleep in the upper rooms, their blankets pulled close. The world outside is only itself today, the hills gray-green and rolling, the sky open, the forest at the edge of the fields standing very still to the south, where the reach spreads out in long, easy rolls of land. The morning comes in a softer gold. The fields of barley and grain are thick and heavy with the summer, bending very gently in the warm air that moves in from the sea. The orchards along the rivers hang with fruit not yet ready to fall, and the bees that live in the old wooden hives along the kitchen garden walls move slowly through the clover. Barely audible, the great house at Highgarden keeps its doors open through the summer months, and the people there move between the cool stone corridors and the warm sunlit gardens without any hurry at all, carrying cut flowers in from the fields, carrying cool jugs of water and shallow dishes of soft bread out to the shaded tables in the long afternoon. In the Westerlands, the hills are blue-gray in the early morning and slowly warm to amber and thyme green as the sun rises over them. The mines still ring softly with the patient sounds of work. The men who come out at midday sit against the warm hillside and eat their bread and look out across the valley below, where the rooftops of the nearest town catch the light, and where the road that winds between them is empty and pale and still. At King's Landing, The Red Keep sits on its high hill above the city, its pale stone not yet worn by the passage of many hands and many years. The towers still have their edges. The great steps have not yet been smoothed. In the wide throne room below, a scribe sits at a small desk near the tall window, copying letters in the afternoon light. His quill moves across the parchment in a small, quiet, steady rhythm, barely audible, a soft and even sound that fills the large room without effort and asks nothing of it. You move through all of this the way light moves through a room, touching one thing and then another, warming each surface in turn, and then passing on. The roads between the great castles are soft with summer dust. The rivers run clear and low and unhurried over their stones. The nights come in slowly, and when they come, the fires are lit, and the fires make the halls golden inside, and outside the stars are very many and very still above the rooftops of the sleeping world. There is nothing here that needs your attention. There is nothing calling for your haste. The great story of this world is still far ahead of it tonight, and it rests now in its oldest and freshest self, in stone that is still new, in banners not yet weathered, in the long, warm, unhurried morning of what it was before anything was lost. You rest here with it. The banners above you are still. Something has changed, though you cannot quite name when it began. The court at King's Landing moves as it always has. Banners still hanging from their iron rings. Servants still carrying platters down the long corridors of the Red Keep. But there is a stillness now beneath the surface of things, a quiet that does not feel like peace so much as patience, a held breath that has gone on so long no one remembers the inhale. You drift through the outer halls in the soft gray before the fires have been fully stoked, and the candles have burned down to pools of yellow wax. The stones underfoot are cool and worn with the memory of all the feet that have passed this way. A steward moves silently ahead of you, his lamp throwing warm circles on the wall, and you follow that light without hurry, without purpose, simply letting it carry you deeper into the keep. The iron throne sits at the far end of the throne room, and even at a distance, even in the dim hours before court convenes, you feel its presence. It is not a beautiful thing. It was never meant to be. 1,000 swords taken from defeated kings, folded and beaten and welded by dragon fire, and the result is something angular and strange, something that catches the torchlight on sharp edges and turns it cold. You do not sit in it. You only observe it the way you might observe a stone at the bottom of a clear stream, unchanging and patient, older than anything around it. Ares sits in it today, as he has sat in it for many years now. From where you stand near the doors, he is a silhouette wrapped in dark velvet, his silver hair catching a thread of light from the high windows. He was handsome once. The old servants remember this. They say so quietly, in the kitchens, in the washrooms, in the small hours when the great keep breathes to itself. They say he was charming, that his laughter filled rooms, that he and his queen moved through feasts like something from an old song, graceful and warm and full of ease. That man is still in there somewhere. You can feel it the way you feel warmth behind a wall, knowing there is a hearth on the other side, even if you cannot see the flame. But the wall has grown thick. Something has built up over years, quiet and slow, the way moss builds on the north face of a stone. Not a sudden transformation, only a gradual dimming, a slow retreat behind eyes that have begun to trust less and less of what they see. His hand stands a few feet to the left, and you rest your attention there for a while. Tywin Lannister does not fidget. He does not glance around the room seeking assurance or recognition. He simply stands the way old towers stand, with a density that seems to pull the air around him into order. His robes are immaculate. His expression is the expression of a man who has decided long ago not to let the surface of his face speak for him. You sense that he is doing great work here, holding things together, the way a cupped hand carries water across a distance without spilling. But water will find its way through fingers, given enough time. The petitioners come and go. A man from the Reach with a dispute over water rights. A Meister with a letter from the wall. A merchant captain asking about duties on Essosi spice. The words drift over you like sound heard through thick curtains, muffled and soft, and you do not need to follow their meaning. What you notice is the shape of the room itself, the way attention moves and pools, the way eyes slide toward the throne, and then carefully away again, like moths circling a flame. And then, thinking better of it, the court ladies sit along the eastern wall on cushioned benches, their embroidery frames in their laps, their needles moving in small, patient arcs. They speak to one another behind open fans, voices low, and there is something in the rhythm of those fans, slow and steady, that is almost like a lullaby. You watch the silk panels flutter and settle, and the room around them softens at its edges. There is a dampness in the lower passages of the keep. You have heard it mentioned. A place where the old drainage has shifted, where the rock beneath the city seeps. Nobody speaks of it directly, It is the kind of thing that gets noted in a steward's ledger and quietly set aside, a small notation among larger concerns. But dampness, once it finds its way into stone, is patient. It does not hurry. It simply continues day by day, opening the hairline gaps that were always there, the ones so fine you could not have found them with a fingertip. You think of that seeping water now as you watch the court, as you feel the temperature of the room, as you notice how the servants move with a particular carefulness, a slight holding back that was not there before. Nobody is afraid, exactly. Or perhaps they are afraid in a way so gradual they have grown accustomed to it. The way you grow accustomed to a sound that has been present so long you forget the silence that came before it. The candles in the wall sconces burn evenly. A hound sleeps near the side door, its flanks rising and falling in a long, slow rhythm. Outside, you know, the city carries on. The market stalls and the bakers smoke, and the salt smell of the harbor coming in off the water. All of that continues, warm and ordinary, unhurried by anything that happens behind these walls. Your attention softens. The throne room blurs at its edges. The figures in it become shapes more than people, a geometry of light and shadow, and the low murmur of proceedings becomes something close to the sound of rain on a distant roof, a sound that asks nothing of you, a sound that simply falls. Ares shifts in his seat, a small movement barely perceptible. A ring on his finger catches the light and sends a brief flare across the stone floor. Then it is gone, and the room is as it was, and the hound by the door exhales slowly in its sleep. Something is bending slowly, the way a green branch bends under the first real weight of winter snow. Nothing has broken yet. The banners still hang. The ravens still fly their routes between castles, carrying small scrolls of ordinary news. The harbor pilots still bring ships in through the channel at dusk, calling out their soundings in calm, unhurried voices, reading the depth of the water beneath them, finding the way through by long habit and by feel. You drift back toward the outer corridors, and the light there is gentler, and the stone is cool beneath your hand where it trails along the wall, and the sound of the throne room falls behind you like a tide going quietly out, drawing back without drama, leaving the sand smooth and still and dark far to the north, where the air arrived in your lungs like a clean cloth. The Starks had always understood something the rest of Westeros had not yet learned to name. Cold does not kill the things it holds. Cold keeps them. A root cellar full of winter apples stays sweeter through the dark months than any fruit left ripening in open sun. The Starks knew this as a stone knows the weight it carries, quietly, without ceremony, simply because it has always been true. Winterfell sat deep in its own cold, the way a seed sits in soil, patient and unhurried. Its walls were old, older than most of the names carved into the histories your grandparents might have read aloud to you once. The stone had absorbed centuries of frost and had grown only denser for it. A network of hot springs ran beneath the floors, so that even in the longest winters, when snow piled against the outer walls like a slow white tide, the inside of Winterfell remained habitable. Not comfortable exactly, not the perfumed ease of southern rooms, but warm in the way a heartbeat is warm. Steady, present, earned, Eddard Stark moved through his world with the kind of care that belongs to men who have spent long years outdoors. He was not a man who hurried. His footsteps on stone carried the weight of someone who trusted the ground beneath him, who had no reason to look over his shoulder. He believed, simply and completely, that a man's word was the fullest measure of him. He believed that duty was not a burden, but a shape. The shape a life takes when it is lived honestly. These beliefs did not make him rigid. They made him legible. You always knew where you stood with a Stark, and for a long time in the cold country, that was enough. The direwolves came into their lives like something recalled from an older world, creatures out of a time before maps were drawn or borders agreed upon. Each pup bonded to one of the Stark children in a way that felt less like ownership and more like recognition, as though the wolves had simply found the humans they already belonged to. They were enormous and quiet in the way large wild things often are, more watchful than threatening, more aware than alarmed. In the godswood, where white bark caught the pale light and red leaves drifted down like slow breath, the wolves moved without disturbing anything, part of a world that had not yet decided to end. And it was precisely this rootedness, this cold, clear, unhurried way of being alive, that made the South so disorienting for the Starks who eventually went there. The warmth of King's Landing was not the warmth of earned heat or hot springs or banked fires. It was a different kind of warmth entirely, the kind that accelerates, the kind that speeds up processes you would rather keep slow. Fruit ripens faster in heat, yes, and then it softens, and then it turns. You have perhaps left something too long in sunlight and come back to find it changed in a way you could not quite reverse. The South had that quality. Its beauty was real. The flowers along the high road, the blue shimmer of Blackwater Bay in summer, the candlelit passages of towers full of silk and argument. But beauty and preservation are not the same thing. A pressed flower keeps its color longer than a flower left in warmth. The South pressed nothing. It let everything open all the way. And open things are also vulnerable things. What the stark years offered Westeros, in the season they were permitted to offer it, was a different pace. A pace closer to stone than to fire. Ned governed the North the way the North had always governed itself, through presence rather than performance, through the understanding that a lord who shares the cold with his people is a lord those people will follow back into cold. He attended executions himself, not because he wished to display power, but because he believed the man who passes the sentence should be willing to hold the sword. That belief was not theatrical. It was architectural. It was load-bearing. His children carried different fractions of him into the world. Some carried his steadiness. Some carried his gentleness. Some carried a version of his honesty so compressed and sharpened by grief that it would eventually cut through things even stone could not. But all of them carried the cold in some part of themselves, the northern cold that does not soften its truths to make them easier to swallow, that does not dress its losses in celebration, that sits with hard things and lets them be hard. Catelyn carried something else. Her warmth was southern in origin, riverrun and open water, and the smell of reeds in late summer. Where Ned's love expressed itself through constancy, hers expressed itself through motion, through doing, through the particular intensity of a person who loves by trying to fix what is broken. Together they balanced each other, the way a room balances when the fire is in the right place, neither too close nor too far from where you sit. The seasons in that world were long and unmeasured, not bound to any calendar anyone could trust. Winter might come in a year or in a generation. This uncertainty did not torment the Northerners. They simply prepared for it without setting a date. The stores were filled. The walls were checked. The children were taught to ride and to fight and to listen. To listen especially because the woods and the walls and the wind all carried information if you quieted yourself enough to receive it. In those years, something in Westeros was being kept. Not perfectly, not without cost, but kept. The cold is an honest preserver. It does not flatter what it holds. It does not pretend the apple is better than it is. It simply slows the softening, holds the shape a little longer, gives you more time to understand what you had before it changes into something else. And in the quiet of that wings of the north, in the distant calling of ravens crossing an open sky, something ancient and steady breathed on. You do not need to hold it. You do not need to guard it. You can simply lie still and let the cold settle gently around you now, clean and honest and slow. 5 crowns rise at once, and the land beneath them grows very quiet. Not the quiet of peace, but a deeper quiet, like something holding its breath. You feel it in the stones, in how mortar that held for generations begins to powder at the edges, sifting down in tiny pale curtains no one stops to notice. There are more urgent things to watch now. There are 5 directions at once, and every general's eye must somehow cover them all. Robb Stark rides south with wolves at his heel, and the cold of the north still clinging to his cloak. He wins battles again and again with an unhurried certainty that reminds old soldiers of his father. Yet the further south he rides, the more the cold thins out, and something essential begins to wear away like frost in morning sun. Victory is strange in a fractured land. Each battle won seems only to produce 2 more, growing in the distance, like pale towers you never quite reach. Far to the east, Stannis stands on a cliff top, and the sea wind fills his jaw with salt. He is all straight lines and right angles, a man who believes in the arithmetic of justice, that the correct answer simply must prevail if you press it hard enough. But the world is not made of arithmetic. It is made of mud and shifting allegiance, and lords who smile at dinner and write contradictory letters before dawn. Stannis stares at the horizon with that same stony patience, and the horizon stares back, giving nothing away. Renly rides in color. His court is warm silk and laughing faces, and the smell of crushed grass from tourney fields. He wears his crown lightly, as a man wears a hat he has always meant to own. His lords love him for the ease of him, for how a summer afternoon gathers around a person and makes everyone nearby feel they are exactly where they should be. But summer afternoons end. You have always known this, even in the softest part of sleep. Even the most golden hour tilts toward evening eventually, and the light goes amber, then rose, then nothing at all. Balon Greyjoy stands on an iron shore and remembers what his people were before they bent the knee to anyone. The sea is their argument, and the sea does not ask permission. His ships go out with salt and iron and the old hoarse cry of reavers. And for a time, the northwestern coast holds its breath under a gray sky, watching what the tide will carry in next. And over all of this, Joffrey sits on his throne of swords, in the Red City, wearing a crown that fits his head, but not his nature. The throne itself seems almost to lean away from him, the ancient blades curving outward like petals of something recoiling. Around him, advisors speak in careful voices, choosing words with the delicacy of men walking on new ice, testing each step before committing weight to it. The court still glitters. Candles still burn in tall windows, but the glitter is different now, harder, like light off broken glass. Rather than polished stone, you drift through all of this from a comfortable distance. You are the slow air above the battlements, warm and unhurried over stone that has stood through more than this. The crenellations of 100 castles pass beneath you, and you notice how each one tells its own small story of neglect. Here a flagstone cracked by a season of unusual frost. There a wooden gate hung slightly wrong, its hinges never replaced after the last siege. Moss has moved into corners that hands once swept clean every morning. Lichen spreads across carved heraldry in delicate pale gray lace, softening the sharp edges of old pride. Loyalty unravels slowly, and it looks very much like stone unraveling. It happens where you cannot see it, deep in the interior, in the places no inspection ever reaches. A lord who swore an oath last summer finds the oath sitting differently on him by autumn. It is not that he has forgotten it. It is that the world has rearranged itself around the oath until the oath no longer points at what it once pointed at. He looks at his sworn words and finds them pointing at ruins, at a cause that has shifted shape, at a king who is not quite what was promised. Ravens cross the sky in every direction, carrying words from castle to castle, from lord to lord, from one cold maester's tower to another. You feel the crossed purposes, how a single piece of news, a death, a marriage, a betrayal, moves outward in rings and means something different at every ring. What reaches the furthest lords is barely recognizable as the original fact. It has been translated through too many hands, each one adding a small warmth of self-interest. Battlements crack not all at once, but one stone at a time. A battlement that falls in a single dramatic moment is a dramatic story, but most of them go slowly. One winter's ice finds a seam. One summer's rain widens it. One neglected season of lime and trowel work lets the seam breathe open another fraction. By the time anyone looks carefully, what held the whole together has long since become only a form pretending to hold together, a shape without sufficient substance behind it. This is what fractured loyalty looks like, given enough time and sky to observe it from. It looks like ordinary stone. It looks like a wall still standing. It looks fine until one morning when it does not look fine anymore. And by then, the men who might have repaired it are occupied with other walls, other seasons, other crowns. You rest in the space between all of this. You are not in any castle, not sworn to any king. You are just the slow drift of warm air above very old stone, watching an age fold into the next age with the same patient gravity that stone eventually folds into dust. There is no hurry here. The ages have never been in a hurry with each other. Somewhere below you, a fire burns low in a great hall. The logs have settled to glowing architecture, red and amber, and a deep pulsing rose that breathes very slowly. A steward who fell asleep in his chair near the hearth breathes in time with it, his hands loose in his lap, his face finally quiet. The hall around him holds its familiar darkness, beams and banners, and the smell of wood smoke and old stone, and something faintly green and damp that means the building has been here long enough to grow its own memory, its own slow pulse beneath the human noise. You breathe with the embers, you breathe with the old stone. The crowns and the conflicts settle into the deep strata of the place now, each war becoming sediment, becoming quiet, becoming the ground the next era grows from. Far to the east, there are pyramids that have stood longer than any kingdom in Westeros has had a name. You drift toward them now, over warm salt air, over the flat water of Slaver's Bay, which holds the dusk sky like bronze. The great cities of Astapor and Meereen and Yunkai rise from their coastlines in layers of brick and mortar, each layer a century, each century pressed down upon the one before it. The brick is red in some places, ochre in others, and where old mortar has worked loose you can see older colors beneath, older paints from older rulers whose names no one speaks anymore. Inside Meereen's pyramid, the highest room catches the last of the evening warmth. The harpy on the pinnacle has lost one wing to weather, and the stub where the wing once joined the shoulder has gone soft with rust, bleeding faint orange down the gilded side. No one climbs up to repair it. The craftsmen who made it are long gone, and those who followed them, and those who followed after that. What remains is the harpy half intact, turning very slowly in the coastal wind, catching light from one angle, then losing it below in the city's lower districts. The streets are narrow and warm and close. Centuries of settling, of building over what was built before, have raised the street level so that doorways once designed for tall men require a low bow of the head. You move through those passages easily, without hurry, and you notice that the walls lean toward each other overhead, as though sharing a confidence neither will ever finish. The stones have memorized every summer here. They hold heat long into the night, releasing it slowly, much as an old hearthstone gives off warmth hours after the fire has gone cold. In a stapper, the bricks were always more honest about their age. They did not pretend freshness. They wore their centuries openly, corners worn to soft curves by the press of hands, by the lean of bodies waiting in long lines in long-ago dawns. The fighting pits cut into the earth have their own silence now, a deep bowl of stillness that collects shadow in the afternoon and holds it. You sit at the rim and look down, and what you see is not what happened there, but what grew over it afterward. Pale volunteer grasses finding purchase in the sand. A thin green patience that asks nothing of anyone. Karth, too, has its particular mode of dissolution. Its walls are older than its wealth, and the wealth has always been the more fragile of the two. You pass along the harbor side and see merchant houses standing with their upper stories shuttered, their lower stories still busy, their great carved gates still polished where hands touch them daily, and dusty where hands no longer reach. Prosperity here has always been a kind of theater, and now, with certain trades thinned and certain routes grown unreliable, the theater continues with a slightly smaller cast, slightly fewer candles in the high rooms, the same lines delivered with the same conviction into a hall that has grown a little quieter. What both cities share, beyond their brick and their age, is a weariness built into the mortar itself. These places were raised on arrangements that could not hold forever. The holding forever was always the pretense, the smooth face, painted over stone that had already begun, somewhere deep in its foundation, to reconsider. And to the west, at roughly the same hour, Harrenhal sits in its riverlands valley and does what it has always done since dragon fire reshaped it. It settles. The 5 towers, each one once meant to be the tallest thing in all the 7 kingdoms, have each found their own angle of lean, their own preferred direction of slow collapse. One tilts north by a degree that visitors cannot quite measure, but nonetheless feel. A faint wrongness in the vertical, a slight asymmetry that troubles the eye without the eye knowing quite why. Inside Harrenhal, in the great hall, the stone where dragon flame pooled and cooled into new shapes has taken on a smoothness that no tool ever made. It is rounded and ribbed where it flowed, and in certain morning lights, it looks almost liquid still, almost in motion, as though the fire merely paused and might yet resume. You rest a hand against it and find it cool, thoroughly cool, the heat of that long ago catastrophe completely spent. What was once catastrophe has become simply texture, simply stone, simply part of the wall. Harren the Black built this place as a monument to his own permanence, and permanence refused him almost immediately. What the fire left behind was not a ruin so much as a revision, the castle continuing in a form it had not chosen, but had learned slowly across generations to inhabit. Between east and west, between the red bricks of Slaver's Bay and the melted towers of the riverlands, there is a kind of conversation, not a spoken one, not a dramatic one, but a quiet correspondence carried on over centuries. Both places were built by people who believed they were building forever. Both were made as declarations, as monuments to the certainty of those who ordered them raised. And both have spent the long years since becoming something else, something quieter, something that belongs less to its builders and more to the moss and the birds and the patient accumulation of seasons. In Myrine, the pyramid still stands, but its standing is a negotiation now. Each year the stone shifts fractionally, finding new arrangements to bear its own weight, redistributing the load along old cracks in ways no architect planned for. In Harrenhal, the towers still reach, but their reaching has become something closer to resting, an upward lean rather than an upward thrust, a long conversation with the sky rather than a challenge to it. You move between these two places in the way that sleep moves between images, easily and without explanation, carrying no urgency from one to the other. The eastern city fades into warm, late afternoon stone. The western ruin sharpens briefly into evening silhouette and then softens again. Neither place asks anything of you. Both simply exist at the pace of their own long undoing. Somewhere between them, in the narrow sea that separates continents, the water moves as it has always moved, indifferent to pyramids and towers alike. It carries salt and nothing else of particular consequence. It reflects whatever sky is above it, and when the sky is clear and pale at dusk, it holds that clearness for a moment before the dark comes down. The dark arrives gently here, as it does over all old places, as it does over all things built to last, that have instead simply endured, and enduring is its own kind of rest. The pyramids rest in their settling. The towers rest in their leaning. Even the harpy, half-winged and rust-streaked, rests in its slow turning above a city that no longer needs to announce itself to anyone. You rest too, somewhere between east and west, between old red brick and old melted stone, in the long, even breath of a world that has seen enough to be surprised by nothing, and has learned, over many centuries, to let the quiet come. You have come so far through stone corridors and smoky hearths, through throne rooms that once hummed with ambition, and now stand very still. And here, at last, is where the story softens completely into silence. King's Landing settles first. The great city releases the day in layers, the way embers release heat long after the flame is gone. Merchants close their shutters. Children are carried inside. Dogs curl beneath carts on cobblestones grown warm from the afternoon sun. Somewhere near the harbor, a rope creaks against a pier, and the sound carries up through empty streets without needing anyone awake to hear it. The city breathes slowly now, in and out, a long, low breath beneath a violet sky. And with each exhale, a little more of the old urgency leaves the stones, drawn upward into the dark and quietly dissolved. The red keep stands above it all, quieter than it has been in generations. Torches burn low in their brackets along the corridor walls. The small council chamber holds nothing but chairs arranged neatly around a long table, and the table holds nothing but dust settled evenly across the grain of old wood. No voices echo here tonight. The room simply rests. The stone walls hold the cool of the evening, and that coolness moves gently through an open window. Barely a breath, barely a shift of air, enough to make the candle flame lean once, and then stand straight again. You walk through these halls without weight. Your footsteps make no sound on the worn floor. You pass doorway after doorway, each one opening onto rooms gone quiet. A candle has burned down to nothing in a bronze holder. A half-written letter on a desk, the ink long dry, the words no longer urgent. A cloak folded over the back of a chair, its wool soft and still. These things were left behind by people whose days were very full. Now the rooms hold them gently, the way old hands hold small things, without gripping, without needing to. The dragon pit is open to the stars. Centuries ago, its domed roof was whole, and the air inside moved with the heat of enormous wings. Now the roof is gone, and moonlight falls freely through the wide gap, touching the ancient stones with silver. Weeds have found their way through cracks in the floor. Small white flowers open only at night, and they are open now, each one a quiet agreement between stone and sky. Moss has softened the edges of the carved archways. The old fire marks on the walls have faded to a gentle gray, and in this light, they look almost like clouds. No name needs to be given to this piece. It simply exists, patient and complete, asking for no witness beyond the city gates. The roads lie pale and empty under the moon. Grass grows at their edges, slowly, steadily, the way all growing things move at night, without noise, without announcement. A field stretches away to one side, its grain standing upright in the windless air. An owl passes overhead, a soft darkness briefly crossing the moon, and then it is gone, and the field is as it was, silver and still and entirely at ease. Far across the world, Winterfell is dark and warm at the same time. Fires burn behind closed doors, their light seeping gold beneath the gaps at each threshold. The great hall is cleared and swept. The long tables stand bare, the benches pushed in, the rush lights long extinguished. A gray cat crosses the floor without hurrying, disappears through a gap in the outer wall, and is gone. The courtyard beyond is cold and calm. Snow has drifted softly against the base of the well. The walls are thick and sure, and the wind that moves across the northern moors is kept gently outside, where it belongs. You let your breath slow here. You feel the deep solidity of old stone around you. This place has outlasted every claim ever made upon it. It receives the night with the same steadiness it receives morning and noon and the slow turning of every season. It is simply here, and so are you, resting inside the quiet it offers, accepting it without effort. The great forests beyond the walls are breathing too. Trees stand in their long rows, older than any lord who ever ruled beneath them. The leaves hold perfectly still. Somewhere very deep in the wood, a branch settles with a low sound that carries once and then fades. The forest takes it in, absorbs it, and returns to silence as if the sound had never been. The hush is not empty here. It is full of everything that has stopped needing to be said. To the north, where the wall once stood enormous and blue-white against the sky, there is now only open tundra rolling away beneath the stars. The ice has thinned and settled. What was barrier is now open passage, and what was passage has been walked by very few, and very quietly. The ones who went that way went without ceremony. The land received them as it receives all things, with absolute, unhurried patience. Grasses lean slightly in a cold wind. The stars above are very bright and very far and perfectly still, each one a small, steady light that has burned without interruption through every age of this story and will burn on through ages yet to come. You are drifting now. You feel it the way you feel the moment just before full sleep, that soft loosening at the edges of thought where one thing becomes another without announcement. The story has told itself through many rooms and many years. Banners have faded and been replaced and faded again. Fires have gone cold and been relit and gone cold once more. Kings and queens and small, quiet people have all passed through the same stone corridors, each carrying something, each leaving something behind. What remains is this: empty chambers softly breathing, dust resting on old wood, moonlight gathered in a courtyard cistern, perfectly still on the surface of the water, a door left ajar by no one now living, admitting a slip of cool night air that moves once across the floor and then settles. A fire reduced to coals, glowing faintly orange in the dark, needing nothing, asking nothing, simply warm. You are lying very still. Your hands are open and relaxed. Your breath moves in and out without effort, without notice. A quiet tide that goes and returns and goes again. The halls around you settle deeper into their own weight, stone upon stone upon stone, solid and patient and kind. The centuries fold over themselves gently, one age tucking softly beneath the next with no more sound than cloth upon cloth. There is always more quiet beneath the quiet, and beneath that, something softer still, receiving you, warm and without edges, without sound, without time. You are already there,